The intent of this slideshow is to provide a brief narration on the highlights of the history and development of the bicycle. One of the most frequently asked questions we hear when we display our antique bicycles is, when was the first bicycle made? The earliest actual example of a two-wheeled, human-powered vehicle is thought to be the Draisienne, also known as a dandy horse or hobby horse, developed in 1817 by Baron Karl von Drey de Sauerbrunn of Mannheim, Germany. This machine had a steering bar connected to the front wheel. The original Draisienne weighed 40 pounds and was propelled by the rider's feet in contact with the ground on either side of the vehicle, and force being transmitted to the vehicle by the elbows via the upholstered balanced board. An example of this machine in Coventry, England, shows footrests on the front wheel spindle for the rider's relief while coasting downhill as fast as 10 miles an hour. But that was very dangerous. One reason is that it had no brakes. When bicycles first became popular, a major problem existed: lack of roads or good pavement. The bicycle created a new freedom which could not be fully enjoyed. Even in towns and cities of the day, roadways were often in a sorry state. Yet the bicycle allowed its rider to pedal freely through the urban areas and out into the countryside, where he found muddy ruts. Hills and great distances presented a big obstacle to all but the most stout-hearted. Three lowland Scots have their permanent historical niche for their major contributions toward progress in personal locomotion and in road travel. About 1823, a Scotsman, John Loudon McAdams, began to experiment with a layer of crushed rock bound together with mud or tar, raised above the level of adjoining land for drainage. Macadamized roads became the accepted type and served well under horse-drawn and bicycle traffic. Kirkpatrick Macmillan, a blacksmith, devised a two-wheeled machine driven by treadles connected to the rear wheel. The exact date, 1839 or 1840, has not been definitely established. Macmillan was the first to discover that two wheels placed in line could be balanced and propelled without touching the ground with the feet. The contribution of the third Scot, John Boyd Dunlop, a veterinarian, was still to come, but you may recognize the name Dunlop in relation to tires. During the next 20 years, 1840 to 1860, there was little work on the bicycle's general development. There has been a great deal of controversy over who first invented the earliest pedal-driven machine known as the velocipede. Recent probing has credited Pierre Lallemant, a Frenchman. His idea of foot cranks on the front wheel was conceived in 1862. It was first ridden publicly in July 1863 in Paris. He moved to New Haven, Connecticut, and was granted a patent dated November 20, 1866, for, quote, an improvement in velocipedes, unquote. This is the world's first public record describing the pedal-powered two-wheeler. These machines used carriage-style wood wheels and iron tires. The heavy iron frame and poor traction severely limited their usefulness. In Europe, they were seen mostly on the finely groomed paths of the formal estates, where they were called dandy horses, and the riders were known as dandies because they usually wore top hats and tails. Rougher roads found in America and possibly the back roads in England and on the continent led to their nickname Bone Shaker. During their brief popularity, several American cities had indoor bicycle riding academies that seemed to have filled the same role as the later skating rink. Bicycling was viewed as providing advantages for all classes, for country clergymen and doctors, road surveyors and letter carriers, for all who had long rounds to perform. With this aid to locomotion, they could do their 10 or 20 miles with scarcely any fatigue. The aim of improving the bicycle was, in general, to reduce weight, ease propulsion, and make it possible to achieve higher speeds by increasing the diameter of the driving wheel. This resulted in a radically different form of machine. The ordinary bicycle, with its large pedal-driven front wheel and small rear wheel, is the best known and was the most common of the high-wheeled bicycles. The wire spokes and steel rims allow a much lighter wheel than the earlier all-wood wheel. With pedals attached to the front wheel, the only way to increase speed was to increase the diameter of the wheel. To mount, one had to put a foot on the side step, getting the bike rolling, then hoist oneself up to the saddle. At a cost of about $150, these high-wheelers dominated the bicycle scene for a good 20 years, but the design was self-limiting as well as dangerous. The first ordinary high-wheel bicycle was made and introduced in 1871 by Haynes and Jeffries, Coventry, England, to a design patented by James Starley and William Hillman. From the number of his inventions and modifications, James Starley well earned the title father of the cycle industry. The high-wheeled bicycle was introduced to America by English firms exhibiting at the Centennial Exposition in Memorial Hall in Philadelphia in 1876. After that exposition, Colonel Albert A. Pope of Boston, a carriage maker, bought the Weed sewing machine factory at Hartford, Connecticut, to convert into a bicycle factory in 1878. This company built the Columbia bicycle, which is still being made more than 115 years later. The ordinary bicycle's reputation for dumping riders on their heads led to many attempts to build safer bicycles with the same speed and comfort. Until the advent of the chain and pneumatic tires, many of these attempts retained one large wheel, giving rise to the collection of bicycle styles we refer to today as high-wheeled safeties. There were many different types. Most were produced in small numbers and enjoyed only short-lived popularity, if any, during the decade of the 1880s. Relatively few of these machines have survived the 100-plus years since their production. The large pedal-driven wheel of the Eagle is the back wheel. An American invention, the small wheel is moved to the front and is the steering wheel. The wheel configuration of the Star is similar to that of the Eagle, also built in America. The driving mechanism is the major differentiating feature. The Star has a spring-loaded ratchet cage on each end of the large drive wheel's axle. These are attached by leather straps or levers that the rider pushes down with his feet to provide the drive power to the wheel. The rider must keep his weight slightly forward in order to prevent tipping over, just the reverse of the ordinary. With a wheel configuration similar to the ordinary, the English Facile moved the rider back with a smaller front wheel and a larger rear wheel. In this way, not only did the rider sit farther back and closer to the ground, but by never pushing down in front of the point of support, greatly reduced the tendency to tip over forward. using a wheel configuration similar to the facile and an even more extreme rake of the front forks. The Extraordinary from England used a different drive pattern. The pedal motion is elliptical instead of circular, and here too the pedal force is kept well back from the point of support. Refinements in the manufacture of chains allowed this early application of a chain drive mechanism to be applied to the bicycle. The Kangaroo, developed in England, allowed the rider to be closer to the ground, allowing a lower and therefore safer ride for a tall person. During the same period that the high-wheeled safeties were being developed, other manufacturers were choosing to place the rider closer to the ground between two wheels of similar size. While the increased safety of this scheme was quickly apparent, so was the discomfort of greater vibration of the smaller wheels. The concept of the diamond frame, common to today's safety bicycle, occurred during this period of the bicycle history, that of 1885 to the early 1890s. A chain drive to the rear wheel was used for most of these machines. Improved frame design and elaborate spring systems applied to frames and saddles were not yet sufficient to take the ordinary out of the picture. Since ladies were expected to keep their ankles covered in public, which was not possible while riding on high-wheeled bicycles, they did not enjoy the freedom and comradeship which cycling offered the gentlemen. High-wheeled tricycles, using a chain to drive two large wheels, allowed ladies to join the men while wearing proper ankle-covering skirts. Tricycles were also used by men and professionals such as doctors who needed a place to carry their bags. Differential gears to permit better steering were introduced to solve the problems of difficult cornering or loss of power. Band brakes and rack and pinion steering, also introduced for the tricycle, were established technology when adopted for the American automobile. Many automobile manufacturers had been cycle manufacturers and incorporated engineering concepts into their autos. Only with the advent of the pneumatic tire did comfort and safety come together, bringing an end to the era of the high-wheeled bicycle. Pneumatic tires had actually been invented about 1845 for coaches and carriages. This was done by a Scottish engineer, R. W. Thompson. However, because of the rough terrain, they did not retain their usefulness. Pneumatic tires had to be rediscovered and brought to the world years later, in 1888, by several inventors, including a veterinary surgeon, John Boyd Dunlop. As with any form of transit, there are those who desire speed. Organized racing was, for the most part, done on wooden tracks known as velodromes. Thousands would come from miles away to watch the excitement, and some races could last up to 6 days. It is believed the competitive nature of the cyclist caused speed limits to be set and posted in towns and cities. Bicycles were the first pursuit vehicles. The speed capability of many bikes was actually better than many early motor cars. Even today, many police are back on the bicycle, patrolling city streets. Most historians would agree that the Wright brothers would be on the list of the 100 greatest men who ever lived. The Wright brothers had 3 businesses in their lifetime: printing, bicycles, and the airplane. In 1892, Orville and Wilbur entered the cycle business, repairing and selling bikes. After 4 years, they began to manufacture their own brands. When they began to experiment with airplanes, they used bicycle parts like wheels, spokes, and chains. Wright brothers' aviation experiments began with an air pressure test bicycle, which, when pedaled rapidly, produced the effect of wind on the test vanes of the horizontal balance wheel. This device led to the Wrights' conception of the first wind tunnel, used to obtain the data necessary for designing their airplanes. The first powered flight by man shows Orville at the controls and Wilbur running alongside. It was December 17, 1903, a cold, windy day on the sand dunes of Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. The bicycle and the airplane builders had done what no man had ever done before. They took to the air, a flight which lasted 12 seconds and covered 120 feet at 7 to 8 miles an hour. As we have seen, the bicycle has undergone many changes in its 180 years of evolution, beginning in 1817 with the Draisienne. Through the Macmillan ingenuity of raising the feet off the ground, occurring over 20 years later in 1840. Again, a 20-year period elapsed to the direct drive velocipede of 1862. The lightweight and higher geared high wheel ordinary evolved just 10 years later in 1871, with the development of high wheel safeties during the following decade, that of the 1880s. Overlapping this period, the safety bicycles with solid rubber tires were developed in 1885, and with the advent of pneumatic tires a few short years thereafter, cycling became a family affair. We see little difference, other than multiple gears, between the 1900 style racer and a 1980 10-speed.